Hello, and welcome to Retrospective Cinema, a podcast wherein we'll endeavor week after week to see the full filmographies of chosen directors. We'll interpret, critique, and discuss. I am your co host, Annie Morell.
And I'm your other co-host, Ryan Saylor. Last week we finished watching through the filmography of Lynne Ramsay, so now we begin the process all over again with our second chosen director, Paul Thomas Anderson, or as he's credited here in his first film, P.T. Anderson. His debut was the film Hard 8, which is also known as Sydney. Here's a clip.
I'm almost lighting it, baby. I'm gonna light the cigarette, old timer. What are you gonna do?
$2,000 hard eight.
$2,000 hard eight's a bet.
Before we get into our discussion about Hard 8, we did actually watch a couple of his short films that preceded Hard 8 in preparation for this. So we're gonna talk about him a little bit. And the first one is the Dirk Diggler story, very clearly a precursor to Boogie Nights.
Yeah, so this is what would be retooled into Boogie Nights. I'm glad he saw the vision. Watching this, I would not have thought it could have been turned into any kind of feature-length film, let alone Boogie Nights. Basically, in high school, late high school, early college, he was 17 or 18. Conflicting reports when I was reading about it. He made this mockumentary. It's perfectly inoffensive in what it is, I guess, about a fictional porn star based on a real one and the rise and fall of him, told in the style of a documentary. What'd you think of this thing?
I mean, it's not it's a 17-year-old making a film. I think that in and of itself, maybe 18-year-old, that in and of itself is very impressive. I think there's so many great dry humor lines to it. I feel that it is tonally not super consistent, in that it is very comedic up until the very tragic end of Dirk Diggler, because he does die of an overdose at the end.
This is a short film that you would have seen if you're listening to this episode of this podcast, but it's worth mentioning at this point that we are full spoilers. So,
yes.
Proceed with caution.
Proceed with caution. Sorry, it's a documentary generally, or it's a mockumentary, I should say. And I really wonder if he saw Spinal. I assume he saw This Is Spinal Tap, because it came out 4 years prior to this. It gives me big Spinal Tap vibes. Very, very like dry jokes. Yeah, what did you think of it?
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. A lot of people seem to be rating it highly on Letterboxd and such, with the caveat that this was a teenager making this film. And yes, from that lens, it's impressive, but on its own merit, it's nothing great. Reminded me a lot of the kind of stuff that we made in high school, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't be submitting any of the short films we made back when to Sundance, and he didn't. Yeah, he went and became a production assistant, and then eventually got the resources together to make a short film that he actually submitted to Sundance, and his career goes from there. But yeah, this original, the Dirk Diggler story, it's fine. I didn't hate it. It every now and then was pretty funny. And the ending actually does land, I think, which is to its credit. But as will be a theme today, at no point watching it did I think, this will be the start of a master director.
I agree. I mean, some great. I think if anything, I would have thought like, oh, this is a promising writer versus director from this, knowing his age and all of that. And his dad did the voiceover, the like kind of documentary voiceover.
Yeah, his dad, I was reading about the family, and I guess his dad's like claim to fame was that he was the voice on like an ongoing television show. So that's like what he was known for.
That makes sense. He has, I mean, that's kind of the most professional appearing sounding part of the short film to me is the voiceover. So that totally makes sense.
Did you manage to track down production assistant?
No. Wait, what?
Yeah, so it's not even on IMDb, but Letterboxd, if you sort by, chronological, in between the Dirk Diggler story and Cigarettes and Coffee, is this other 9-minute short called Production Assistant. And so I did track it down. It's on YouTube. I think it was released later as a bonus feature on one of his physical releases. It's nothing incredible, and I'm not gonna tell you to stop recording and go check it out, but I was only the 129th person to log this on Letterboxd, so very few people have seen this thing, but it's pretty funny. It's just it's Paul Thomas Anderson serving as a production assistant on they name it in there, I forget, a TV movie, and going around to different departments on the set and asking them, which one's the most important, and they all say themselves, and it's cute and funny. It's honestly, it feels like a vlog. I called it a proto vlog when I logged it, but yeah, that's about that. But I did watch it, so I wanted to briefly discuss it.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't, because I should look at Letterboxd for filmographies, but I did only look at IMDb. So that sounds cute. That sounds like something I would like. Maybe I'll watch it after.
There you go. But then, yes, after that was Cigarettes and Coffee. What do you think of that one?
Again, clearly a precursor to Hard Eight. Specifically the diner scene at the beginning of the movie, which we'll get to. But
the character of Sydney too.
Yeah, the character of Sydney, and the actor Philip Baker Hall, who is just to me, it's such a captivating actor. He could read a phone book and make it interesting. Yeah, I don't know what to make of this one. I like the whole conceit that they're all kind of bound by at least cigarettes and coffee, and Sydney's little speech at the beginning, about how you need to light your cigarette and have the coffee poured before you talk about what you need to talk about. I didn't know what to make of the connection, and maybe there was no direct connection between Sydney and his little protege guy, pseudo son, and the couple on their honeymoon who were fighting about his wife's gambling.
Right. So that was my big complaint with this thing. I think the reason it probably stood out at Sundance is that there's this plot device going on that everyone involved, disparate as they are, is connected through this one $20 bill that has been signed on the back, and that jumps between them, and they all interact with it in some way. And it does make the film, unique, and I could see, seeing it in a pile of other short films and being like, wow, that one had an interesting idea. But watching it on its own, it's a pretty contrived idea, I felt. And yes, eventually these connections, I couldn't keep up, and after watching it, reread through the whole thing on Wikipedia, and I still could not keep up. It's just a bit much of how this $20 bill made it around the room and eventually ends up on the floor and all these things.
It feels almost to me like it should be a little bit longer, so that I can kind of better understand how the dollar bill made its rounds. Because yeah, I agree. I also was like, wait, why is this the guy who had an affair but he has a wife? It was very confusing and hard to track. I agree. I think contrived is a good way of describing it. I will say I loved the hitman bits. The guy on the telephone, that his scene partner, because they each have one scene partner, and his scene partner is unseen on the phone, and then you could argue his other scene partner is the man in the trunk, Steve, who had an affair with the other guy's wife. I don't know. I was very confused by it, and it felt disjointed to me. But I think a little more promise is
Yeah,
shown.
the
through
big
it.
improvement from something like the Dirk Diggler story is that there's a lot more intentionality with the camera and the editing. Both those are, big improvements. And yes, obviously Dirk Diggler is a mockumentary, so you're gonna lean into that. But specifically the tracking from the first duo to the second duo is a interesting camera choice that pays off really well.
Yeah, using the waitress as tracking her like midsection basically. I clocked that as well.
Yeah, so there are some more promising directorial choices in this one, but yeah, again, I don't know. I'm glad I'm not running Sundance, because again, I wouldn't have seen this and said, all right, give this man $3 million to make a feature, which they did. So there you go.
Yeah, I guess you don't have the eye.
I don't have the eye. I mean, I don't know. All right, so you ready to talk about Heart 8?
I am, yeah.
Slash Sydney.
Slash Sydney. Yeah, I do kind of agree that it should be called Sydney.
Okay, well, that's actually the first thing I want to talk about, because I think the studio made the right call in changing the title. So what's your argument for why it should be called Sydney?
Well, I think because it centers around this man, ultimately. And the kind of big mystery, at least for me, was, why is he doing all these nice things? Like, is he just a really good guy? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't dislike Heart 8 as I think there's an argument to be made for it, and I'm curious to hear yours.
Mm-hmm.
But I do kind of like, I know the studio's worry was that people would think it was about Australia if it was called Sydney. And my rebuttal to that is call it Sid then.
Yeah, so I think Heart 8 as a title is the best of both worlds, because it's still, like, yes, it tells the audience that's seen this on a poster in pre-internet days that it's gonna deal with gambling, but also it specifically, I think you still get a title that centers around the character, because the most interesting choice that we see, otherwise a very responsible man, throws $2,000 on one of the worst bets in the casino, and drawing attention to that from the title is interesting, and it colored the way I perceived he and John as a duo, that maybe this man on occasion is willing to throw $2,000 on a really bad bet and see what happens. In this case, though, instead of craps, it's this homeless man. But so to me, the title of Heart 8 is just so much more layered and interesting than just saying, Sydney.
Okay, you know what? You convinced me with that. I like it too. Good on you, studio. No, I agree that I like, because it is so centered around gambling and just risk in general. That I like that it's, both a connection to who I would argue is the main character. You could argue it's John, but I don't think I agree with that, and I don't think PT would either.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and having all this kind of character background, yeah, and I like what you're saying about how it draws attention to that moment, with Philip Seymour Hoffman, his one scene.
So good.
Incredible scene.
This is a 90s film. It feels very, post Pulp Fiction, before the kind of studio reformations of the early aughts. It's, just a number of choices. I mean, good and bad. I like 90s film, especially 1999. I think brilliant year for movies. But on the negative side, and I don't know how much you do or don't want to get into this, but our one black character is pretty awful in ways that are stereotypical.
Yeah, well, the one black character and the one woman, I think. I think Gwyneth Paltrow's character has...
At least she has some depth.
Yes, she has. I was gonna say she has a bit more complexity, but yeah, I did know, like, ooh boy, the one woman and the one person of color, and they're both pretty two-dimensional to different degrees. And yeah, I agree that it really, it's 90s. 90s-ness is showing through quite a bit. That score is quintessentially 90s.
Yeah.
Piano, the oboe, all this like great percussive sound that kind of mimics the sounds of the casino in a lot of ways. I loved that. But very, you don't hear soundtracks like that where it's very like isolated instruments and isolated percussive instruments in particular. So that to me is the positive of
Yeah,
of
well,
it
I
being-
mean, there's a lot. Yeah, we can go back to those characters sooner than later, but yeah, on the positive side of the '90s, 90s storytelling is very tied to this era of America where nothing was too bad in the world, which is very hard for us to comprehend in the modern scene. But it culminates in 1999, where you get all these films about people trying to break out of cubicles because they're so bored. You get The Matrix and Office Space and Being John Malkovich, and all those types of films where we start with someone at their boring desk job, and like how we long to go back to the days where our complaint with America is that it was boring. Certainly not a complaint anymore. But yeah, in leading to that, when it was starting to be a piece of the zeitgeist, you get films about people trying to break into more interesting lives, kind of storytelling. This is clearly inspired by I think Tarantino is a reasonable inspiration in a couple ways. And then
definitely.
And then films like Goodfellas and Casino, although there's a little bit of difference there, obviously. Yeah, it's just such a remnant of that era of storytelling, and I enjoyed it from that lens.
Yeah, these kind of, it's all about the small problems because, well, I suppose John's problem is not small.
It gets big.
He has, and it certainly he makes it big. Like he does all of that to himself. In following in Sidney's footsteps, which I think is probably Sidney's fear that in teaching him his casino ways. But yeah, it starts out with Sidney finding John, which I wonder I wish we had gotten a little more explanation, and I think this kind of loops back to Cigarettes and Coffee, in that I was like, well, this is a coincidence that he just ran into the son of the man that he killed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Do you want? Well, we can start there. That's my least favorite moment in the film.
He just runs into at his diner. It's clearly Sid's go-to diner because he has a bunch of meetings there, and it just happens that the son of a man that he killed in the past is homeless and sitting outside. Like, okay. Which, we don't know that at the beginning. We obviously, that's revealed
Right.
much later by Sam Jackson's character. But yeah, once it was revealed, I was like, wait, this seems awfully convenient for the plot.
The generous reading of that is, there's a line when John is talking with Sidney the day after Clementine has been in his bed, and he says it's like an angel appeared. So there is an argument that the film has a fate element going on in the background. But I'm saying that up front because I disagree with that, because I think every other choice in the film is very much done by the characters, and their mistakes lead them to turmoil, except for this large scale event where Sidney finds the son of a man he killed and decides to adopt him, for lack of better phrasing.
Show him how to scam those casinos into giving him food and a place to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did, I enjoyed their relationship before, their greater connection is revealed, of like this sage and this kind of dopey apprentice, because John is a little dumb, maybe more than a little dumb, and I think it's pretty clear from the beginning that he he tells him like, oh, I know, I think he says like taekwondo and some other martial art and regular karate.
Yeah, three types of karate: jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, and regular karate.
Mm-hmm. And then he's got like Velcro shoes.
Although the Velcro shoe is not as egregious as Clementine's keychain of the ages.
Oh my god. No, so again, quintessentially 90s. Just 50 charms and 50 keys.
There's a ball on there.
Yeah, there was.
Yes, so you talked about the first chunk of the film being this sage apprentice relationship. That was what I was most engaged with the movie. I thought that whole sequence up to the time jump was very interesting, and I wish we'd stayed in it. I hadn't seen this film in a while, and I'd only seen it once before, so I'd kind of forgotten how it progressed. I forgot that there's this big time skip, and yeah, when we were back with him getting the coins, doing small bidding in order to get these larger rewards, secretly scamming the casino, all that stuff, I thought, I was having a lot of fun with that, and I kind of wanted to stay in that mode.
It was like Ocean's 2 for a little bit. It was great.
And then, so during that, yeah, we get, all these great little moments. I logistically ran through, I think you do have to eventually take out more money for the coin dollar trick to work, but it would have been an unnecessary scene ad, so I'll excuse it. But yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed all of that.
Yeah, I had never, this is my first time seeing Hard 8, and I was pretty taken aback that there was such a huge time jump, but I was in for it. I was like, okay, let's see where this takes specifically John. And clearly it takes John to trying to be exactly like Sydney, down to dressing like him and owning the identical car to Sydney, which was very adorable. And, that's like very hard hit, that idea that he's kind of following him around like a little puppy, especially.
Well, that's what draws Clementine to him ultimately, is that he showcases loyalty through the way that he associates with, who she calls the captain.
Yeah. Which she is also dumb in my view.
Yeah.
Just a couple of airheads in love, maybe. Yeah, and at this point I'm like, all right, is he really St. Francis? Because at one point someone, I think, John C. Reilly's character, John, at the beginning says like, who are you, St. Francis? And it does appear that he's just doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He sees Clementine being harassed by men in the casino, like restaurant or bar that she works in, and he's very much like, oh yeah, like, do you have to do this or they fire you? And she's kind of like, well, I don't know. But it's clear that she's basically a prostitute without being a prostitute for the casino.
Right. Well, and yeah, Jimmy shows later that there's even like a person on payroll to keep in charge of that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so he kind of tries to take her away from all of that, gets John to take her shopping, and gives her a nice place to sleep. Well, he follows her. I should say he follows her to some client's motel room and sees her coming out, which, yeah, I do understand her confusion in thinking like, well, he's going to want something from me for this. And I was kind of almost waiting for that moment of some moment of him not being just a total saint with her. And I do think we eventually get that later on.
Right.
a little bit, though you could argue it's warranted somewhat with the situation, the hostage
My
situation.
final opinion of Sid is that he is just as bad as everyone else, ultimately. That he, does these things to help people, but the people he's helping and the way he helps them just kind of worsens them. And the only reason he's helping anyone, it seems, is to try to make amends. Yes, very much so with John, but also he says at one point that he has this son and this daughter, and that ends up that he doesn't get to see anymore because of a divorce. And it's, he ends up making a makeshift son and daughter in John and Clementine. So I feel like it's all just kind of self-serving in its way.
Oh, definitely.
And
yeah. Once we find out from Sam Jackson that he's killed his father, I'm like, oh, this is all.
But even
this is all.
And even before that, there's that moment, and I was debating about whether this was just 90s edginess or not, but I think it does serve Sydney's character that Clementine gets slapped in the face, and he's immediately just able to dismiss it because that goes outside his narrative for these two. So yeah, he does good things. He's cool. He's suave. I'd like to have a conversation with the guy, but I don't think that makes him any kind of better than any of the other characters in this story.
Yeah. Well, and clearly a guy who can still fall victim to his own like impulse and ego, as is illustrated in the Philip Seymour Hoffman crap stable scene, where you have PSH's character just goading this man, goading Sydney this whole time with this incredible, I guess, probably improvised monologue.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Yeah. Well, and I if you trust IMDb trivia, I read a bit saying that was mostly improvised, which makes sense for him. And I guess I'm wondering like what you thought of that scene, because by the end, like at the beginning, like Hoffman is like clearly hates this guy, but by the end he's kind of rooting, and maybe it's just because he also has money in the crap stable, but he's like kind of rooting for him to get that heartache.
It's very clear that I don't know, anymore, but it's very clear that Paul Thomas Anderson was not an outsider that chose a casino story. Like this is a man that spent some time in the casino. Those shifting power dynamics at tables happen all the time. I was talking about, a recent, I went to a blackjack table over summer and I had 12 into 3. I won't, spend a whole time doing a tutorial here, but maybe our listeners will know or not know what that means. Anyway, and you're supposed to hit. If you don't believe me, you can look it up. It's real. But no one at the table ever believes me. So I put up an offer and I was like, hey guys, I know that you're going to be mad when this inevitably makes the dealer not bust and costs us all money. So I'm going to hit if it's up to me, but you guys can pick, what do you want to do? And everyone's like, no, like, you're good. Like, hit. And so I hit, dealer doesn't bust. We all lose money. And then instantly everyone's, like very angry at me, when a second ago they were all, happy for me to hit. So yeah, that shifting power dynamic is very real to the casino because money's involved and humans are the way they are.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in casinos as a child, obviously not gambling, but I've never gambled myself in a casino, and so this is very much a world I'm not. Clearly you are more versed in, and I'm not as versed in.
But I don't know if that's anything to brag about. But yeah, did you know what the Hard 8 bet was? Because they didn't explain it in the film, and I thought that was an interesting element.
So I don't know how to play craps, but he's betting the Hard 8 is to get 2 4s, and Easy 8, which is what he ends up rolling, is something that's not 2 4s. So like I think he gets 3 and 5, but you could also get
right. That's exactly correct. So this man's betting, a lot of money on a pretty not smart bet, and he knows it.
Yeah, well, and his whole thing is like, oh, I don't do that anymore. I don't make big bets. You know, he plays Keno now.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, like, he is tempted at different points to go back to his old ways. And you know, you could argue that this whole thing is him not changing at all, really, even though he's purporting to change. I don't know. Skipping forward, unless you have something still with that, the call that Sid gets from John, which we don't know it's John. You figure it's either John or Clementine at that point. And I liked that whole sequence of suspense where it's like, it's probably John or Clementine, but we don't know which. Okay, he's going to John at this motel. John will not let him into this motel room. And you're thinking like, what could
that scene at the door is great.
Yeah. And jumping back to what you said earlier, I agree. I think my favorite part of the movie is definitely before the time jump in general, but that whole bit with with the hostage is my second favorite part, because it's you know, the suspense is there the whole time, but there's also this like kind of macabre comedy element to it. As John continues to reveal like how he and Clementine have gotten into this situation. There's this great line from Sidney, because John says like, oh, you know, we asked his wife for the $300, which, you know, worth a little more back then in the 90s, but yeah, not like money that you take a hostage for. But they say, you know, he says, we asked his wife for the money, to bring us the money, and Sidney says, how did you get in touch with his wife? And I thought that was great.
Mm-hmm.
So funny, because he is, you know, they're stupid, and Sidney kind of is the hard parent maybe in that moment.
Yeah,
no longer babying them.
I thought of you during the door, when they're talking through the door. I was like, I bet Annie will enjoy this part.
Oh yeah, so good. Yeah, and he's like, we cool? It's like, we're cool. Let me in, please.
Yeah, I find it says it's cold out here, you know, like, just trying everything to get in.
Yeah. He's like, promise you'll help me. And he won't. He doesn't promise. But of course he does. There's a moment where he leaves, where he says, you know, this is your problem, and then he does ultimately go back, which I think, you know, that's what makes the character so, for me, so intriguing to watch, because he is this kind of moral quandary of a character. He's not a good guy, but sometimes he's a good guy, and you know, he does ultimately help them escape from that situation.
Yeah, I think he wants to be, you know, this extremely helpful man, but ultimately he's interacting with a group of people that, yeah, the way that he helps them is going to ultimately hurt them. And maybe Clementine does get out of sex work by the end of the film. It's a little hard to tell. She at least commits to it. But I guess, yeah, enabling is a good word. The way he helps John ultimately gets him, you know, attached to Jimmy, ultimately gets all these events to happen. And, you know, putting Clementine with John gets her in all these situations. So it's not his fault. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that I think to really help these characters, you'd have to not just give them money and provide. You'd have to do other things.
Yeah, because both of them are very infantile.
Right.
You know, which is maybe why one of the reasons why he feels such a strong urge to be a father figure to both of them. And they're both in hard places when he first meets them. Though clearly it's not when he first meets Clementine. A morally ambiguous hero.
Right. There's a good line in that first scene where he says, you know, John's a very old friend. And at first I kind of laughed like, oh, that's obviously a lie. We know because they met 2 years ago. But I think also it serves to show kind of a truth about Sidney, that probably the people in his life, like maybe to him, that is a very old friend. It doesn't seem like anyone's really sticking around. We don't see that he has any friends his age ever in the film.
Yeah, I picked up on that as well, thinking like, oh, 2 years, especially for a man that age, is not a long time to be friends with someone, but it's all relative, as you're saying. Yeah, and you could also interpret that as he's a very old friend and that I have known of him since I killed his father.
Right.
So, who knows? I come back to really just wanting a little more. I think there was room to have a little more of an explanation of, or some scene where he's like tracking him somehow.
Well, I don't think the film really knows how to get from scene to scene, and we've talked very positively here overall. And I am gonna, when we talk about would you recommend this, I do, but I think the biggest problem with it is that you have these sequences that are all individually pretty interesting, whether it's the scamming the casino up front, or the hostage, or this extended confrontation between Sid and Jimmy. But I don't think the film really knows, or at least a young Paul Thomas Anderson knows how to get from each scene to the next. Obviously we get the 2-year time skip the once, but yeah, there's just never a moment in between any of these. We're just going from sequence to sequence, and it leaves you a little bewildered, which maybe is the intent, but if it is, I don't think it pays off in any artistic way.
Yeah, to be honest, I was kind of expecting after the first time jump another time jump of like, okay, we're now on to the third act, but it really just kind of stays in this very short period of time once we do the time jump. And yeah, I agree. It feels a little bit disjointed, not. And maybe that's intentional. Probably not. Paul Thomas Anderson was 25 when he made this. So we get to this part where Sam Jackson has this meeting with Sidney in his car. Sam Jackson does not want. So many good little comedic bits. I love Paul Thomas Anderson for that. And it's clear from the start, from Dirk Diggler, that he loves comedy, because Sam Jackson's like, no, don't smoke in my car, it gets in the upholstery, and Sidney is like, yeah, I'm gonna smoke, and then Sam Jackson's like, well, then I'm gonna smoke too, can I have a cigarette too, kind of just gives in. I did want to point out, I'm wondering if you noticed it, Sam Jackson's character Jimmy pronounces Clementine's name Clementine over and over again.
Yeah, I didn't know what to make of that, because it's either, a very intentional choice to show that he doesn't value this woman the same way that our other characters do, or it's just that Samuel L. Jackson read the script and was never corrected. I don't know, but the fact that I don't know makes me feel like it was the wrong decision either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if there had been a little more to it somehow, it would have felt a little more intentional. But yeah, knowing how Sam Jackson is a lot of the time on set, I would not be like thinking of the little anecdote from I think it's Phantom Menace, where it's like, well, if you're a good guy, you get green or blue lightsaber, and he's like, how about purple? And they just give him the purple lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem like he kind of just does whatever the heck he wants. So I wouldn't be surprised. It did make me make the connection finally between like Clementine being named Clementine and the idea of clemency for Sidney.
But
so,
I think he finally even says that word, right?
Yes, he does. That's why I wrote it down. That makes so much sense. Yeah, he says clemency and then Clementine, and so that really kind of drove that point home, that like maybe Clementine, because obviously helping John is his way of trying to make himself feel better about killing his father. And with Clementine, I think it could be argued that then, like, okay, well, this is my like truly good deed,
Mm.
because I didn't do anything to her. Like, I'm not the reason that she is in this spot, but I'm gonna help her out of sex work, out of this hard spot that she's in. So maybe that, but yeah, I think there's a lot. You know, it's a debut feature film, so it's gonna
Right.
have, it's not gonna be perfect, especially when you jump from those short films to this.
Within that, that series of events, and we can break them all down or just kind of talk generally. So Jimmy shows up at the vehicle, says, I know what you did. We get that reveal, and then kind of basically threatens to talk unless he gets paid $10,000, and that's negotiated down either honestly or dishonestly, and then we get what leads to the finale of the film where Sid ultimately kills Jimmy. I don't know. Obviously we get the reveal in there, but outside of that, what do you think of all of these events and why they're there?
Well, going to the reveal, I think it was kind of a like, oh, okay, that totally makes sense, but no nuance in that reveal.
Mm-hmm.
Just very much like an information dump. I loved the bit of Sidney prepping himself in Jimmy's house.
Right. Good character work
like,
there.
Sitting in the chair. Yeah. That I liked. I think in general, the third act lagged a bit for me. Like, I definitely think there was some cutting that could have been done to make it a little more concise. And then you use that time to, add the scene that I want to be added. But yeah, Sam Jackson just becomes this kind of, is this kind of cartoonish villain,
Mm-hmm.
which is just kind of disappointing, but of the time, whatever. And you wonder, like, oh, does Sidney really only have $6,000? Or is he just, betting that Jimmy will not challenge him on that?
Yeah.
And then you even have the like, oh, what? It's in the bank. Like, we have to wait until morning.
No, that's a lie.
And then that's a lie. It's actually in his hotel room. Yeah, I don't know. To answer your question, I think it lagged a bit. I thought it could have been tighter. It was probably the least interesting. I think it shouldn't have been the least interesting part. It's the climax of the movie. But that was my thought about it. What did you think?
I think again it was just a young PTA not quite knowing what to do here, because our character, arguably the main, but at very least the deuteragonist, goes away along with his now wife, and then we still have a chunk of the movie, so we get this reveal that I don't really think serves much of anything. I think it was much more interesting when Sidney is this mysterious character than that you can kind of piece together why he's doing these things. Like, I had already kind of latched onto that he is doing some sort of recompense when they talk about that he is no longer gets to talk to the son and daughter, and now he has this adopted son and daughter. So I didn't need the big reveal to get that side of him. So I think it just kind of didn't help anything, and it is very heavy-handed, like you said. Like, they just kind of drop it on you, and then from there, our climax revolves around a now, at least to me, now less interesting Sidney and a still uninteresting Jimmy. We get that big final burst of violence. That's good, I guess, in its way. Like, I mean, it's interesting, it's engaging, but yeah, that whole chunk of the film I thought was just inherently less interesting because all of our character dynamics that were what drove the plot along were gone.
Mm-hmm. My question to you, I actually have two questions. One, so the end of the movie, Sidney kills Jimmy at the end. So by the premise of the movie, and maybe it was gearing up for a sequel, shouldn't Sydney now have to be a surrogate father to Sam Jackson's kid?
Oh, that's hilarious. You're saying that that's why he's at the diner at the end, is to meet his next son
Yeah,
in this scenario?
that's my hot pitch to you.
That's funny.
Uh,
Anyway, let me hear your other
really
thing, and then
good
we'll come back to
question,
that.
but, yeah, and then why is this a Christmas movie? Kind of. Why did he? Why is there so much Christmas music in it?
Both great questions. So that's not how I interpreted the ending at all. And I think I'm gonna stick with mine. Though I think that is great that, you know, that Sydney's actually on a cycle of thousands of young men that he has to adopt every time he kills someone. This is, you know, but a glimpse. But my interpretation for that ending was that John didn't come back. Was how I read it, and that now he has to sit alone at the diner, which I thought was sad and interesting. That, you know, maybe he finally did save John and Clementine, but now he is alone again.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's my serious interpretation of the end.
You're for the Christmas stuff, I have no idea, no clue. I actually watched this one with Kimmy because she wanted to have seen one of the movies before we talk about it finally. She's been keeping up but hadn't seen anything, so she joined me on this one, and that was her first question. And yeah, I don't know. And yeah, I know with Morven Keller we specifically talked about how that is something that I latch into and everything, but my last Messianic reading got so clowned on that I think I'll just stick to I have no idea.
Well, now I'm like, oh, I actually see it a little bit.
I mean, I think this one I would lean into much less than Morven Keller. Actually, I still feel a little bit like I did for that one, but there is an argument that, you know, John's being saved, but that and that ultimately is where the film ends. Yeah, I don't know. That's really all I have for why there is so much Christmas music and why the credits play out to Christmas music.
Yeah, weird end. A mixed bag of a film overall. I did enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, we can immediately just get to final thoughts. What would you recommend it?
I would recommend it. I think especially if you're a Paul Thomas Anderson fan, it's great to see where he started. You know, is it his best? Like, definitely not. But still worthwhile. Some great performances from specifically Philip Baker Hall and Philip Seymour Hoffman. The three named Phillips really kill it.
That's our new band. Yes, I would. I think even if this was it, like if this was the greatest thing this guy ever did, which obviously, I mean, he would go on to do much better things. I think it is fun and worth seeing in the same way that, you know, Boondock Saints, like those films from that era where the filmmaker didn't go on to make anything else, but they're of that time and enjoyable. But yes, within the context of the larger filmography, I think it was very interesting to see where he came from and yeah, to know where he's going. So regardless of doing a filmography run, I would recommend it, but especially if you're into PTA, I think it is neat, like you said, to see where he started from, and to see what carries over, because very little, I think, does carry to his future films.
Yeah, I'm not. It's been a while since I've watched any of his films, so it'll be fun to see the progression. Obviously, he has a cast of characters that he really, and by characters I mean actors, that he really likes to work with, and that kind of evolves over time, of course. But you know, like Philip Baker Hall is in Boogie Nights.
Philip Seymour Hoffman's in so much.
Yeah, and I mean, they clearly have a love story, and I love the three named guys in general, together. But yeah, I'm glad to have watched this, and I think it's an excellent start to our P.T. Anderson run.
It's also just very accessible. Like, you couldn't grab someone off the street and show them Inherent Vice and expect them to want any more of this. Like, I think you could watch this and say, okay, like, let's see what this guy does next.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that is a great point. Because there are, even though I think like, yeah, There Will Be Blood is a great movie. And we'll get there.
I'm so hyped.
Oh my God, me too. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to to the average viewer, to the casual viewer.
Everyone needs to see it.
I mean, yes,
I'm recommending it to
Okay.
literally everyone.
I mean, but I
But I get what
think
you're saying.
this is accessible, and that I think,
Yeah.
even if you're not into film, even if you're not into great meaty performances, there's something for everyone.
If you want to connect with us, I am on Letterboxd at Ryan Loves Film.
And I am on Letterboxd at Annie Morell. You can find the spelling of my last name in our show notes. We are also on both TikTok and Instagram at the handle retro_sin. That's CIN for cinema, if you haven't figured that out yet.
By the time you hear this, there should be videos up about our thoughts on Eddington, which is very exciting. A movie we both really connected with.
Yes. Ooh, I'm excited to make that content.
But yeah, if you disagree, agree, somewhere in the middle, just want to write to us in any way, please hit us up on something. We might talk about your comment in a future episode. Until then, as I'm wont to say, happy watching.
Happy watching, folks. Yeah, I said it too. That's right.
Oh my gosh.